John and Richard are never going to stop talking. Again, if everybody could take their seats. Okay, I want to welcome you tonight to tonight's panel discussion. This is the second in our series of, right now, 3, coming on 4 panel discussions. I'm going to get you that. So we're going to have the panelists come up in just a second, so you can wait a second. I'm going to give you a little bit more information about Partners for Ethical Care in case you're unaware. Our interest is in abolishing the entire gender industry. The concept of the affirmation model that you should affirm somebody's gender identity is what we seek to abolish. Nobody has a gender identity that doesn't exist, and nobody should be affirming that idea. So we are most interested in that, putting that into public policy in schools, in the government, and that is our mission. Once that mission is pretty solidified and that train is running toward truth, then we will dissolve our organization. And that's what we're interested in doing. We are all volunteers. There are 9 women who run Partners for Ethical Care, and none of us get paid a dime. We have been doing this for 2.5 years. We have testified. I personally am usually the person who testifies, but we've testified across the country for legislation on this issue, and we have currently tipped into 26 states that we have stopped transitioning children. We are so proud of that. And when we say children, that we want to stop the transition of children, our belief is we're not talking about people who are under 18. Everybody is a child of someone. Transition is good for no one. So we seek to stop that completely across the world. So tonight we have 2 panel discussions that are going to run one kind of after another. The first one will be males, and then the second one will be females, and then it'll be a combined Q&A. We've given each of you pens, so as we switch up the chairs between those 2 panels, we're going to pass out note cards, and we ask that you write any questions down, and then we'll collect them for the final Q&A that's going to be around 8 o'clock. We're running slightly after schedule, that's fine. This event is being live streamed on YouTube on our partnersforethicalcare.com YouTube channel. So you can also see it there. You can send out the link to other people after this event. I think the most important thing I really need to say is thank you to our sponsors for this event. I want to call them out by name, starting with the ones in Wisconsin who were our pilot event. Parents on Patrol, headed by Ali Schweitzer, was really the organizer for our event there. And then Moms for Liberty did a fantastic job of getting a lot of people there in Wisconsin, and we were so happy for that. The Wellness Way joined us, and they are there. They have information over there, and I'm going to ask Aaron. Aaron was nice enough to provide notebooks and pens so that our panelists can write down any thoughts as other people are talking. They might write down thoughts and then have them in their mind. So we're very appreciative of the Wellness Way for sponsoring. Each of those people donated some money so that this event could actually happen. The only thing that we got from a funder was a little bit of seed money to be able to pay the deposit for this venue. So the rest of the money, in order to fly people to a location, in order to put them up in some sort of lodging, and then to give them some sort of food stipend, comes from your tickets and any donations that we get from all of you. So we really appreciate the sponsors being able to pay mostly for a lot of the flights, and then all of you being able to pay for the lodging so we don't have to sleep on the street. The next 3 groups I'm so happy to say thank you to. First is the Illinois Family Institute, David Smith. Is David here? No? Jenna has to represent David right now, which is fantastic. Not that I think that Jenna is going to be better than David, but Jenna runs a fabulous podcast. You can see it in your program. It's called Self-Evident Podcast. She really reaches young people along with some of her colleagues, and I encourage you to listen to that podcast. So I'm so grateful to the Illinois Family Institute, David and his daughter Jenna for sponsoring. The Parents Matter Coalition, I think Tracy and I have spent about 15,000 hours on the phone talking about all manner of things that we can get done in Illinois. So I'm grateful to the Parents Matter Coalition. They're doing good work in Illinois, and if you don't know anything about them, they have some information here. Tracy is here, and I'm sure she can talk to you until the sun comes up tomorrow. The New Mexico Freedoms Alliance was one of the first organizations in New Mexico for our New Mexico event. And we really look to local organizations that are already doing good work and they're already interested in this topic. We are a singular organization about a singular topic, but other organizations really like Parents Matter Coalition, New Mexico Freedoms Alliance, they cover a variety of topics. But what we really appreciate is this may be one of their 20 topics that they cover, but we appreciate that they are interested in elevating our voices and the voices that we put on this stage. The last is there's a mom who really said, you know, I want to donate for my family business, and I really think what you're doing is important. And so she's taken on a lot of volunteer responsibilities in New Mexico. And so that event, while it says in your program at the beginning that it's going to be in June, we've actually moved it to September because we're trying to build a lot more momentum around New Mexico and figure out who are the right panelists for that. So I wanted to please give a round of applause to all of our sponsors. And I want to thank you for being here. I will say that we consider it a successful event, even if none of you are sitting in the audience, because one of our major goals for all of these panel discussions is to bring quote unquote detransitioners together, because when we see these young people coming together and having conversations and spending time with each other as human beings, we see amazing things happen after that. So it's really seed planting. And so even if none of you were here witnessing this panel discussion, we would have already achieved one of our major goals, which is to bring people together from across the world who have this shared experience and be able to spend time together and grow through that experience. But I do want to say thank you to each of you for buying a ticket and coming to this event. So please give yourselves a round of applause. Lastly, I want to thank my sisters at the Partners for Ethical Care. Partners for Ethical Care, like I said, is an all-volunteer organization. I may be a person that you might see publicly on the news or here on the radio or something like that, but there is an entire team of women, some of whom will continue to be private, maybe for a long time. And those women are really the bones and the brains behind Partners for Ethical Care. So know that while I might be a face that you might see, it's not possible to do without an entire team of women behind me. So I'd like you to give a round of applause, please, to my sisters. So I want to introduce the people who are going to be on our panel this evening. I'm just going to start with the male panelists, and then I'll introduce the female panelists when they come up. Please, Ritchie, and I'm going to ask you to take the seats actually in order. Ritchie Herron. Ritchie's been speaking out against the harms of gender affirmation since 2022 and has publicly been documenting his recovery. He's been working diligently behind the scenes, advocating for others, and leading on legal action for those harmed by gender affirming care in the UK. He writes, loves his cats, likes fast cars, and if you're buying him a drink this week, it's gin and tonic with a hint of fresh orange. Please welcome Ritchie. I'd like to welcome Nick. Nick is a 30-year-old man who detransitioned in 2015 after socially transitioning for 2 years, including 15 months on cross-sex hormones. He was fortunate to realize as early as he did what a mistake transitioning would become if he didn't turn back. But it remained a long process after to accept and appreciate being a guy, which the trans identity only served to delay. Nick hopes to be part of the conversation about why boys and men can struggle so badly to accept being male. Please welcome Nick. Richard Anumene is a 29-year-old atypical Jewish modern Orthodox man temporarily residing in the San Francisco Bay Area. His interests are political science, creative writing, music, nature walking, and Oriental anthropology. He dislikes anti-Semitism, actions and behaviors of anti-Semites, cognitive dissonance, incessantly policing language and all kinds of bigotry. His goals are to make Alleva, being married and raising Jewish children with his future Jewish wife, and being a Jewish mentor for Jewish youth. Please welcome Richard. And lastly, I want to welcome our moderator for this evening. Our moderator is Pamela Garfield-Jaeger. Pamela Garfield-Jaeger is a licensed clinical social worker with over 20 years of experience. She's worked in a variety of settings, including New York community-based agencies, residential programs for foster youth, schools, and mental health clinics in California. She has been a clinical supervisor for 10 years. In 2017, she had to leave her profession due to a severe disability, and when she returned in 2021, so much in the mental health profession had changed, particularly when it came to treatment of gender dysphoric patients. Because Pam continues to cope with moderate chronic pain and can't work a regular full-time schedule, she has been emboldened to speak out on these issues, build her own program, and provide consultations to parents. Pam has a new book, which you can buy in the back, A Practical Response to Gender Distress, Tips and Tools for Families, geared for families who are trying to make sense of the gender issue and give them practical tips. This book includes powerful artwork by Detransitioners, ideas on how to start a conversation with a trans-identifying teen, a trans English dictionary, and a comprehensive resource list that includes nonprofits, advocacy groups, legal and education resources. You can find Pamela on Instagram, which is her favorite, at The Truthful Therapist, and that's all listed in your program. Please welcome and say thanks to Pamela. Now you can all test your mics.
Hello.
Hello. Oh,
Hello.
there we go. Now mine's working. You guys want to test yours?
Mine's working.
All right, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. This means a lot to me. As you heard, I do have some moderate chronic pain. I'm doing much better now, but before all of this, I was pretty much bedridden for 4 years, and I felt really voiceless and powerless. So to be up here on stage is really special, and to share this experience with all of you. So just want you to know that. Okay, so we're gonna just start with, I'd love to hear from each of you what you've been up to lately and what's something interesting about you that we don't already know. And it could be something completely unrelated to gender.
Well, I'm a musician. I started playing the drums and moved from there to guitar, keyboard, and I write my own music. That's what I'll say for that. Hello.
Okay. What am I looking forward to? Well, I'm looking forward to my car to be finally fixed so I can use it again. But really, at the minute, I'm trying to get into more outdoor stuff, especially gardening. Brought a strimmer recently, which was like a very middle-aged thing to do. No offense, Michelle. Because, you know, we do have a little debate going on what is middle-aged. I say it's my age, but never mind. What am I looking forward to in the future? I'm really looking forward to this piece of writing that I've been working extremely hard on for the last 2 years, and with special thanks to Kim, who has been guiding me as a mentor throughout this process. I'm really looking forward to having that finished because that resembles a great deal of thought, and it's the main things that got me here. So when that comes out, I'm really looking forward to that. And of course, I probably will have a resolution to my legal action by the end of this year, I'm hoping. And we're all very optimistic about the outcome of that. But I can't say more than that.
Hi, everyone. My name is, again, Richard Anumene. I'm looking forward to living in Israel. I'm excited to start work tomorrow. with a catering company. It's basically a startup, which is nice. It's based in San Francisco. Let's see how I've been doing. I've been doing quite well. I've been volunteering at Chabad. I've been affiliated with the movement. It's been fun. It's been therapeutic. It's been bonding for me. It's been healing for me. And I want to continue on that journey towards living as a traditional Jewish man. That's about it.
Okay, the next question is about, I want to hear from you guys a special moment that stands out from your advocacy. So perhaps it's meeting certain people for the first time, or being told about your bravery, or how you helped somebody, or maybe when, like a victory, like when a certain bill passed or something like that. I want to hear the moments of glory, and I think we all do. So share, please.
Yeah, I'll go first then. Swearing on national TV was quite funny. To be honest, I did enjoy that moment. I've met some absolutely amazing people throughout this. The name, like a list of names that were just in a different world to me before. Now all of a sudden I'm thrusted into that world. I think the glory moment for me though was walking on stage in the LGBT Alliance and having a standing ovation there with all those people, and it was just like one of those moments. It was very breathtaking. So that was me.
Well, I haven't been to things like this many times before, or many things in person. So I've always kind of stayed a little bit on the outside of a lot of like the internet conversations. I mean, just a lot of it is just too much for me. So I try to just pop in from time to time and contribute in the way, to the extent that I feel like will be helpful. So it's been those really just occasional times that I do actually get directly in touch with real people. So there have been a few times that that mothers of sons have reached out to me. One of them happens to be here, and I'm not going to point her out, single her out right now. But it is really, it's really meaningful to me to actually have a chance to, I guess, realize that some of the things I've said online have been impactful, and then to hear about how that is actually relevant to other young men right now who are going through the same things that I did. And then it's also very gratifying to be able to actually meet some of the people who I've known online for a long time, which this is only the second time that that's happened. So.
I'm happy that I've contributed to ensuring that people don't make the same mistakes that I have made and entertain the same things that I have entertained. I went to, I think, Ohio, I think it was last year. I basically testified in support of, restricting gender-affirming care for minors. I feel like it was the right thing to do at the time. It was, I don't think it's something that should be marketed to minors and children who are still trying to figure themselves out. So, and I think the whole concept of basically commodifying regressive stereotypes and stereotypes in general, I think it's very problematic. I mean, there's masculine men, there's feminine men, there's masculine women, there's feminine women. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with expressing yourself. and people shouldn't feel the need to medicalize in order to be themselves. I think that's wrong in itself. That's my 2 cents.
I wanted to share a moment too. So I was in the Epoch Times film Gender Transformation, and they flew me to New York City for the premiere. My family's in New Jersey. I lived in New York City for many years, so I had my liberal mom come to the screening of the film, and it was really special for her to be there because she didn't believe me or listen to me. She also just couldn't believe that I was on stage because she's the theater person and I'm not. But to be able to share that with someone and just within my family, it was a special moment. So. Okay, so let's see. What is your biggest accomplishment so far that's not related to any of this? I want to hear just more about your lives.
I guess I'll just say in December, I got my master's in theology.
Woo!
That's as far as I've gone in my education.
I've re-entered the dating market. The last time I was in it, it was like 2017. Regaining my self-confidence. I've noticed a change in my behavior, my mood, my outlook in life. I'm no longer depressed. I'm no longer dooming. I'm no longer catastrophizing. I'm looking forward to waking up every day and doing new things and helping people and meeting people and getting to know people, and even meeting people where they're at, even if I disagree with them. I am very much open-minded and not so quick to kind of dismiss people.
Could you just repeat the question once more?
Oh, sure. What's your biggest accomplishment so far that doesn't have to be related to this?
I think being able to walk outside without that fear or whatever it was that was making us scan every passerby. And I know this may sound really fickle and stupid, but being able to eat as I walk, like I could never do that before. Like I couldn't bear the sight of anyone like just watching me eat, and then being able to do that without anyone worrying about what anyone's thinking, what I'm thinking, just enjoying what I'm doing. Like say an ice cream or a pasty. If you ever come to the UK, get yourself a Greg's, right? And and that in itself is the basic freedom that I was looking for in transition. So it's like this freedom that I've been able to reclaim, and I didn't think that was obtainable after everything that I've done. So being able to walk and eat may seem like such a small thing to some people, but to me, massive.
Okay, now it gets to the hard stuff. So we all, I think, here agree that no one was born in the wrong body. The signs here say it right there. But I want to hear from your unique perspective, if you could explain why no one is born in the wrong body.
My body is not wrong, it is right.
Hold it closer.
Sorry, yeah, my body is right, it is not wrong. The thoughts around why I thought it was the wrong body were all really wishful thinking ideas, and I'm not articulating this very well, but I'm just going to try. But quite simply, I felt alienated out my body before. I didn't feel like I was part of my body. I wasn't connected to it, but now I do. I value it. It's a tool. It's the best tool you'll ever have in your life, And I really want to look after it now for the first time in a while. So I think that for me, that's how I knew that it wasn't wrong. It was just my connection that was wrong.
Yeah, and I forgot to ask the follow-up question. You kind of answered it for the rest of you. After you explained, how did you figure that out, that you were not born in the wrong body? What was your epiphany? How did you figure out that your body is that tool?
Unfortunately, my epiphany was just a rude awakening or surgery. and going through that, I was already quite, how should we say, quite exhausted by the time I had surgery, but I was quite battered down, and I was very much prepared to have this as the rest of my life. And then when it didn't go as expected, and everything did kind of tumble down very quickly, very hard, all those things I was putting off for the last few years, I was just like, oh wait, I was right about this. You know, I've made a serious error of judgment. And I think that all kind of tied in. It wasn't a one moment realization. It was a series of miniature things, but unfortunately, it came on the back of immense trauma for me personally, which begs the question, what would have happened if I never went through surgery? I don't know. Honestly, I couldn't tell you, because I was quite functional, but then I was quite dysfunctional in other ways too. It's, you know, you can't possibly tell in a scenario like that. But it happened, and I didn't do very well for the first few years. But after that, I was just like, nah, screw this. I'm not wrong. You're wrong. Fuck you. Sorry.
Okay, to answer the first question, there are no coincidences, and Hashem makes no mistakes. And second question, it was the surgery. I realized 4 months after I had that surgery that I made a huge mistake trusting people who were really not, having my best interest in mind. They were self-interested. They're about themselves, about, status, and making a lot of money and then retiring early, and they just took advantage of people like me, and unfortunately, they continue to do so. And I think for the first year or two, I was in a mess. I was like dooming. I was catastrophizing. I was basically saying my life is over. There's no way I'm going to get married. Nobody's going to want me. This is a waste of my time. Why am I here? Why am I even pursuing a case? I'm not going to win. This is a waste of time. My family's destroyed. My parents are passed away. Why am I here? Why am I still here? Why do I feel the need to be here? And after a year or two, after 3 years or so, I had this awakening, and it was a direct response to an event that was very awful, very evil, and there's somebody who was killed, was murdered, and that person triggered me to change course. And ever since, I've been striving to be a traditional Jewish man. I'm no longer suicidal, no longer depressed like I used to be. I want to live. I want to live every day. I cherish every moment of my life. I cherish my interactions with people. I'm not taking things for granted anymore.
Well, I mean, there is, first of all, the fact that when people want to change their body, there really is nothing physically wrong with their body. But everything that you get to do in life, you're equipped for with the body that you get from the beginning. And it's not just everything that you can physically do, your physical abilities, but your whole mental life, your whole, the way that you're socialized, the way that you learn to interact with other people, your body comes into play in all of that. And so I don't believe in gendered souls or gender identity, and I don't even think a lot of people who transition actually believe in gendered souls. Sometimes they do, but there's still just this kind of treating the gender identity like it's this totally separate thing from your body. And you know, I'm not too dismissive of that, because that stuff means a lot to everybody, even if it's not something that you can physically locate on the body, like gender and everything that you feel around your social life and what that has to do with your sex and your presentation. But the sex that you're given from birth plays into all of that. It plays into how you develop. And so my whole concept of a woman or of a man is not going to be the same as a female's concept of a woman or a man. I was glad that in the Lost Boys documentary, they kind of picked out on that part, because actually, yeah, that coincidentally, I even said then that was like kind of part of that realization that I had, that I was trying to play into the whole social role of a woman, and it felt somehow like that was supposed to be like that would be what would be very natural to me. So I just thought, you know, I don't know if I believe in a gendered soul or this or that. Like that wasn't it. I just thought, practically speaking, I thought I would fit best into the social role of a woman if society would accept me that way, and society was willing to accept me that way. The place that I lived in was fully willing to embrace me that way. I had like nobody, you know, trying to make me doubt my transition. But just trying to do that, you know, I found out that I'm really very male, even if there are certain things about me that, for whatever reason, you know, I you know, can make me feel like I'm more like a woman, in much deeper ways, and in ways that are constantly being reinforced in my social life. I'm male. I was socialized as a male among males, and you know, my body has to do with that. But I don't know. I could just keep trying to ramble to think of more ways to say that, but that's what I would say.
That leads to the next question that I have for you, which is, what is different about being a guy in this space talking about gender? Because sometimes, you know, the guys don't always get the attention as much as the girls. And what would you like to see more of or less of for guys? And what do you wish people knew?
That is definitely something I'd have to think about more to be able to think of how to put that. But I mean, that's, yeah, it's, oh, well, I feel like, I don't know, even if I think about it for a while, I probably will just flounder to sort of think about it. It's very different. Yeah, it's, I mean, there are reasons why men don't want to stick their necks out into these conversations, because for a lot of reasons, but at least one of my major personal sensitivities is that there's always the threat of the accusation of pervert that's always lurking under the surface. You can't get away from that. And then and some men are more sensitive to that sort of thing, and others aren't so much. But at least from my particular experience, that's extremely jarring, and I know it is for a lot of others. There's a lot of reasons, but that's definitely what sticks out to me.
So the difference between, how is it, as a male detransitioner?
Yeah.
Ha 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 ha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know you talk about this a lot online.
my
That's really what made me think of
freaking
the
God.
question.
So,
I want to hear from you in person.
all right, okay. So when you detransition, when a woman detransitions rather, they have a sisterhood to fall back on. They've got multiple different shades of feminism and women's groups who will embrace them with open arms, whether they're gay, straight, or bi. There is nothing like that for guys. Nothing. Instead, you are not only the problem here, you are the perpetrator. In fact, you need to repent for all your past transgressions. No pun intended with that word. Okay? And it's like, that is extremely unfair on someone who may be victimized or they may have been brought in, as Richard was saying, through the recommendation of those around them. And what you often find is we are there to answer for the crimes and sins of all the other men who have done some disgusting things. And I understand that sort of reservation and that sort of distrust for men, and that idea that they must meet one or two boxes. They're either good and gay and poor little gay guy who got traumatized, or they're a bad, rotten AGP heterosexual who is just trampled all over women. And it's almost like even that there are degrees of empathy that you're allowed to have with the men, and also it's like it goes back to what Nick was saying about the sex roles between men and women. Men are supposed to be self-reliant, independent, and strong. So for a man to come out and say, I'm vulnerable, I've been victimized, and I shouldn't have done this, it's, well, you're a fucking idiot then, aren't you? Like, that's kind of the attitude that you get. So what you actually have is you've got this sort of vacuum where no male ever wants to come out, because you're just going to get a barrage of abuse, not just from the typical camps that you can expect, but your apparent allies who are not allied in the slightest. And if it wasn't for the parents who were there to support unconditionally, I would have just been like, I'm not putting up with this. This is ridiculous. This is obscene. I'm not this person who they said I was. So I don't think it's easy as a detransitioner, full stop. But as a male, there's no benefit sticking around. There's none. And that needs to change, which is what I'm doing by holding the line and just being like, listen, I don't care what crap you send my way. And sometimes it does get very intense, but someone has to do it. Because until then, we're going to be locked into this, like, it's all acceptable to, like, you know, call a child, and I mean like a young teenager or somebody who isn't a teenager, an AGP boy, and I find that abhorrent, you know. And it's like, we kind of throw them to the wolves, don't we, in a way. And if you're a young man, you're on your own, kid. I'm sorry. And it is very difficult, and I do hope it changes, but that is my experience of it. And sorry, there was a supplementary question to that, can you?
I think that covers it. Just what would you like to see more of? It sounds like you want more support, is what I'm hearing so far. What else?
Yeah, I mean, I think we also need to have an understanding with the males coming in this, that women are going to be angry, and that they may not be angry at you as an individual. They may be angry at you as a representative of that group. And I think it takes a lot of maturity to get to that point. And here's the problem, guys. If you transition and you've got quite a bit of arrested development, you're not very mature, especially in your emotional intelligence, and it takes a lot to get there. So naturally, you're gonna claw back, and you may well retransition and rejoin the people who aren't gonna give you this. At least in that group, you've got your own little crowd, right? That's my take.
Richard, would you like to answer?
Yes, please. What was the first part or first question?
What is it like to be a guy in this space, basically to be a detransitioner as a male? And what would you like to see more of and less of?
Well, I mean, we get so much vitriol, hate. We're seen as pedophiles, perverts. Like, people pretty much like overgeneralize people who, like, the males who entertain it, who live as trans women. They see just one stereotype or two stereotypes that aren't really representative of the experiences. There's multiple different motivations for people, especially vulnerable people like I was in the, to want to live as the opposite sex. I'll give an example. I was molested. I was sexually abused during my formative years by a now deceased brother. He committed suicide in 2018. He abused me for several years, even after my father separated us. Um, he pretty much emasculated me. He did whatever he wanted to do with me. My dad didn't really do much. He didn't intervene. There was no like family counseling, no family therapy to address any grievances or any issues between me and my now deceased brother. And I never got any like trauma therapy or any help for the sexual abuse, the bullying, a lot of, like he said a lot of like nasty things about me, very homophobic stuff. And the crazy thing is, after he committed suicide, I later found out that the partner he was dating is a trans man. So there's a lot of skeletons in in his closet that I still don't know till today. But he was living a double life. He was doing a lot of things that I'm not even aware of. I'm still not aware of, but um, basically, the reasoning why I decided to do this, and I don't know if it was really a conscious decision. It's trauma based. It's trauma induced. I was trying to run away from myself. I was trying to be somebody else. I was dissociating from myself. I didn't want to grow up to be a man. I didn't want to be a man. I wanted to be a subordinate woman in a same-sex relationship with an actual woman. So I wanted nothing to do with men. I hated men. I hated my father. I hated my brother. Really, I hated all the male siblings. And I saw transition as a way to escape from a horrible fate. I didn't want to. I didn't want to be a husband. I didn't want to do any of that. It terrified me. I didn't want to become like my dad, who he's passed away. He had a horrific ending to his life. He was alone. He died in the hospital. You know, nobody was really there. He was a lonely, miserable person, and I didn't really want to grow up to be that way. So that's about it.
So I'm really thinking about how a lot of women think that they're the only ones that are harmed by men, but men are harmed by men too. And men are harmed by women too. And it's just not that simple. So I was asked to define what AGP is. For those that aren't aware, Tulip, I'm calling you Tulip. Ritchie brought that up.
Oh my God, this is falls on me. Oh dear. It's related to a theory of organophilia by Ray Blanchard in the 80s, where the theory basically states that there are two types of trans people, and there are subtypes within that. So you've got the heterosexual ones who have, so you can have anatomical organophilia, where you really want to emulate the bodily functions of women. Hence, I'm sure you've heard all about trans-identified men saying that they're having a period. That is that bodily organophilia, when they're trying to say that, because they're trying to, it's very wishful thinking that they have this function, right, which they don't. And then you've also got the homosexual transsexuals, which it's not every single gay guy who transitions out of like the homophobia and stuff like that. These typologies, I personally feel like have got a place in this conversation, but I don't think we should replace the conversation with these typologies, because to me, it feels like gender dysphoria 2.0. Ah, well, you've got this condition, so you may as well transition. To me, it just feels like the same, more of the same. And when you understand the history of WPATH, you will understand a lot of them have that predilection of autogynephilia, and you'll understand why a lot of the policies and the boundary breaches are being put in place, because what it does is it makes that easier. But autogynephilia itself is an escalation. It's not an innate part of someone's sexuality. It's a malfunction in that person's sexuality. It's not something to be celebrated. It's something that needs to be helped. But hopefully that's answered the question. Would you like to come in, Nick?
Yeah, I think sometimes, well, the idea of AGP is starting to be talked about more. Well, it's been talked about for a while, but it's something that's, I think, it came to mind when you were asking about like what needs to be talked about more. I'm not going to try to say too much because I think it's like a really complicated topic that needs more maybe nuanced conversation, because it's something that a lot of times people will kind of throw around as like as something to label people with, and it can either be sort of to shut people down, sort of with like the pervert accusation, or it can just be sort of this like, I just accept that I have this, and it's kind of just a given that they have it. And it's often conceived as like a male's like meta attraction, like the attraction that they would have to women being turned back on themselves, so they want to be what they're attracted to. And there are, the more that I've heard discussion about that with like self-identified autogynephiles, I've definitely found that there's a really wide range of what that looks like. And I've generally said that I see myself as having a certain kind of profile in like the AGP profile, but I never really call myself that, because the kind of classic definitions of what AGP are seem like they're just so clear cut, like that, and it's basically treated as it's this fetish that like you are transitioning purely to, you know, for your sexual arousal. I think that that's why it's such a contentious topic, and it's there. I think there needs to be more place for there to be conversations around these types of topics, because like on places like Twitter, where you have everything about detransition kind of being talked about at the same time, you have the activism and the sort of like, what do we need to do to change just like malpractice in society and trans ideology, and then you have people who are trying to work on their own issues and like support groups, and they're kind of all happening in the same place. And you have sometimes feminist groups that are saying, why do we need to have sympathy? Why do we need to know all of this nuanced stuff about like what males go through, whether they're AGP or whether they're not, like detrans men? Why do we need to know? Why do we need to have sympathy? Women who feel that they're vulnerable to males who identify as trans. So I definitely appreciate the complexity of the situation. Like Ritchie was saying, you can't exactly expect that that women are going to just automatically trust any male who has an experience that they associate with danger. But at the same time, you get lots of males who are just trying to work through their issues, and you've got these people just kind of crossing paths in ways that it's really not productive. So I don't know, some way to resolve that and allow for more nuanced conversation.
I'll just add in on that, Nick, and just say to the parents who are listening, do not give over your children, however old they are, to the so-called experts who think they know anything about this topic. Don't do it. You know better than they do. And to be honest, a lot of the pro-ortogynephilia stuff is all transition affirmative too, because it all talks about the surgeries. It even goes on to other types of what are essentially fetishes and normalizing that. And I'm sorry, it's just, if you've got an AGP kid, well, how's that any different from a trans kid? You know, it's ridiculous. And it's a very, as you also said, Nick, it's an out-of-date thing. It's not current. There has been more recent authors like Anne Lawrence who wrote a book on that, as I think it was about 2011, Man Who Would Be Woman, I think it was called, possibly. But still, again, it's only the people who think they have this condition who are becoming experts in this condition. How is that any different from these gender dysphoric individuals saying, I've got gender dysphoria, I'm an expert in gender dysphoria? It's the same shade. It's the same. It's a rebrand to me. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't care if I am or not. I don't care if anyone else is or not. I'm just not interested in anything that gives us a wedge in to essentially medicalize very young, distressed lads, because that's what's happening.
It's certainly a subject that needs more research, thought, discussion, and Twitter doesn't help. That's for sure. All right, so I'm just going to move on to another question. This is another one that's inspired by some of the things I see you guys talk about online. What do you think of the idea that adults can just do whatever they please? You know, we're worried about the kids, but, you know, adults are consenting. What do you think about that?
I don't think the notion is true. I don't think we can do whatever we want. We live in it's a social contract, right? We live in a society. There's norms that we all abide by for the well-being and of the community, for the well-being of, you know, a collective. And there's a reason for them, you know. There's a reason for these social rules and these, you know, formalities, and it's to ensure that we continue to exist and that things are going in a progressive direction. Things are getting better, and you know, we need role models. We need positive role models. We need people who are exemplars, who can really show children, you know, what it really means to succeed, excel, who can really kind of work with them and, you know, pretty much explore their talents, their interests, just, you know, help them discover who they are, help them, because it's a journey. This whole thing is a journey. And we need able adults, people who are capable of doing that, who are not maladaptive, who are not self-destructive. We all, like, all the adults have a moral obligation to, you know, be mentors, you know, be role models, they're basically the elders in the tribe. Like, you need them to be there to fulfill their role in order for the tribe to continue to exist. So that's about it.
Remind me of the question one more time.
Yeah, so
I
what do
had
you
it.
think of the idea that adults can
Oh.
do as they please? You know, people are concerned about the children because they're minors, they're not consenting, but adults are consenting. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that trans identity is fundamentally self-hating. I don't think that it's don't think that it's something to affirm. I don't really think that it's something that there's good reason to foreclose on the possibility that someone could actually love their own body. Apart from even medically transitioning, just kind of like the identity, to sort of foreclose on that and then say, this is your identity. It's kind of not really giving people the chance of the possibility that they might actually, like, you're male, and you don't just like blandly accept, and I'm gonna like bear through life that I'm male, but you can actually love being male and appreciate that this is the way that you get to experience the world through this kind of body. So I don't think there's a good reason for there to be for that to be like the medical standard or the mental health standard that that transition would be a treatment regardless of what age you're at. I wouldn't go around grabbing anyone by the neck and telling them not to transition, because I'm aware that there are going to be people who like they're just going to feel that way. But that doesn't mean that I would ever say that it's a good idea. So neither do I think that any kind of mental health or medical organization should say that it's a good idea or offer transition like as an elective service. It doesn't seem there's any justification for that.
I'm going to be a bit more hardcore, sorry.
I tend to be pretty soft, gentle.
I'm probably going to upset anyone watching online. I'll just say this didn't start because there was a cohort of children who needed a transition in the 60s and 70s, did it? No, it starts with adults, it ends with adults. And the second
Yes.
the second that you can make any sort of reservation or adjustment for a very young adult, you can do it for somebody who's 16. You can do it for a 16-year-old, you can do it for somebody who's under 16, and then under 13. It'll just reset back to where we are. What's the point in saying, no, you can't have that mark? That's what we did so many years ago. If the whole system is broken, and it is totally broken, the idea of gender needs to be deleted full stop. It's a ridiculous concept. And what we're also saying is we do not care about people when we're saying that. Adults can do what they want. I don't agree with that at all. I don't want adults to be going in and breaking laws and doing things that are really, really bad for them just because of, in the name of liberty and autonomy. That's not, sometimes being guided and sometimes having that sort of influence from somebody who's a bit older is liberty, is autonomy, to have the opportunity to have the right advice, to make the right decision and the right information as well. I don't think there's anything autonomous about going off and making these reckless mistakes, because it is very reckless. And when you get somebody who is much, much, much older, whatever, and they're like, I've lived my life and I just want to do it, and there's all the balances and checks in place in this ideal little universe that I've just conjured up, then sure, but that's not what's happening. So because that's not happening, because there is no leeway, because there is no real sort of concessions being made, we have to go hard. We have to go hard the complete other way and work backwards from that point. Because if you give the end point at 18, I can guarantee it'll be 5 years before we're back to where we are now. So that's why I think it is not okay for adults to.
I'm just going to do a few more questions so I don't go too far over time. But this one is for you, Ritchie, because you're here all the way from the UK. So I wanted to ask you specifically, and others can add to it their observations. But there are differences and similarities between what's happening in the gender industry in the US and the UK. For example, you have the NHS, and our health system is completely different. And there are several cultural differences. And the cast review, of course, came from there. So can you speak from your experience and your knowledge? What are the differences and similarities that you're aware of between the countries?
The idea of informed consent, we don't necessarily have that model in the UK. We've got the consenting process where your doctor's supposed to tell you about the procedure and what's going to happen, what could potentially go wrong, and then you sign the sort of papers. There's that aspect, but in terms of gender medicine as a whole, you've got the whole duality that America's all private healthcare. So there is an aspect of competition and quality, and there's tiers of surgery, whereas in the UK, all NHS patients, which is the majority of us, get through this very discounted, because it is discounted, it's like a cheaper version of the process than what somebody who would go through privately. So the medical negligence is higher, and they're just kind of, they're rather blasé. If you go private, you may still get a terrible experience. So to me, private or public seems more or less the same. The difference between the UK and the US is Turf Island, obviously. So we are glaring, like, so much things are happening in the United Kingdom. It is so different from the US. In the US is very much like 2018 of what the UK was at. That's how I feel. Like, it's not that you're behind because you don't need to go in the same direction either. It's totally different. It's not the same. But what I do hope is that what happens in the UK and other European countries is observed by lawmakers and politicians here too, especially when it comes to things like the cast review and the recommendations from the back of that. That has already made its way around the world. And I think I'm quite proud to have that be my country that does that. I think that's an amazing thing for the UK to be leading the way in this fight, because it is the fight. But other than that, I think it's all around pretty terrible, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Anybody else want to comment? Okay. All right. So I'd like you to talk to the people in the audience who are ambivalent about speaking up on this issue. They may be scared, and they do have a lot to lose. What do you have to say to them?
I'll do this and I'll pass on. So, if you've got a lot to lose, don't gamble it away. You know, I think that's quite a sensible thing to do. The people who do speak out have either lost a lot or they're in a position when they're able to. Most people, there is no obligation, is what I'm saying. You know, if you've got a career and you've got a family that you're worried about, I understand. I have a career. I don't have like kids or anything, or a family like that. So it's not quite the same. I don't need to worry about people's personal safety in the same way. Yeah, they could come after relatives of mine, and sure, but again, it's just not the same. So hopefully.
That's why I'm here. I had less to lose. People say I'm so brave. Well, yeah, I was on disability for 4 years, and I lost my career. So I felt like I was called to be here. So I don't look down on people who don't speak up, but I do wonder, what is the line and where we have to speak up. I'm still thinking about that myself. Anyway, what would you guys like to say?
Oh. If you're self-sufficient, if you're independent, you know, if you can withstand basically criticism and backlash and, you know, vitriol from, you know, people of all walks of life, then I think this is something that is doable. You can, you know, you can withstand, you know, you can survive it. You can make a difference, and you can make a difference while at the same time staying afloat. But if, you know, if you're in a, you know, if you're working and you're working at a job and it's not a secure job, and you know, and you're just trying to make it and you're struggling, and, you know, you're trying to make ends meet, and you're especially for like a low income family or, just starting out. I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, I understand how honestly pervasive, how problematic this issue is, because it's now mainstream. You know, I wish that this was tackled like a few years ago. I wish it was tackled and people did something about it in 2014 when it was in its infancy. But, now it's all over the place. And it's going to be much more harder to kind of tear it down. And I think the only way to do so is basically normalizing that it's okay to express yourself in various ways without, medicalizing. It's okay to be, a feminine guy. It's okay to be a gay guy. It's okay to be a masculine woman. It's okay. So there's a similar phenomenon, but it's kind of different. It's in Iran or Persia, but they're doing the same thing over there. But it's like it's more discreet. But it just goes back to the same notion or the same concept that people have an issue with men who don't fit into and women by extension, they don't fit into heteronormative society. So like you give these people no like out. There's no way they can other than to basically entertain this to its to fertility to its futile ends, which it's like I never became a woman. I became like a persona. I created a persona of a Jewish woman, but it was a way to cope, and I don't really regret the experience, but I wish that there were people basically kind of paying attention. I wish I had people like people looking out for me, and there was none. There was no safety net. There was CPS. None of the so-called like institutions were there to intervene and really take notice and do the right thing. And even with my family situation, how it fell apart, I think a lot of the issues is like the system, the systems in place that were designed to protect people like me or help people like me, they're doing the exact opposite of that. Like CPS is like Child Protective Services. It's one example of that. They're not doing their due diligence to actually help people, actually, hold the right people accountable for what they're actually the abuse that they're actually doing. They're criminalizing parents who are actually looking out for their kids, and they're defending those who are harming their kids. It doesn't make any sense. So that's what I have to say.
I don't really have anything to add. Just I agree. If getting in, you don't have to get involved, and if getting involved is going to jeopardize your own well-being or your obligations to other people, then I mean that's just much more important than trying to save the world.
Okay, last question. Okay, I wrote this out, so I want to make sure I read it properly. Each of you are here because you're special. You're a symbol of hope and truth. However, there are plenty of people who still identify as trans and are still in the same circumstances you were, or they've even detransitioned, but they haven't been able to do as much healing as you. Some of that is time, but I think there's more to it. What do you think it is about you that's different from them that makes you special?
I speak funny. But seriously, I think a little bit of it is just maturing. I got diagnosed autistic at the start of 2023. I knew it like ages. And but at the gender clinic, I was like, I think I'm autistic. I don't think I'm really trans. I'm like, no, you're trans. You're not autistic. But I'm definitely autistic. And I think like kind of learning to be more compassionate with yourself is such an immensely powerful tool, especially in your decision making, especially in your day-to-day living. You know, like I used to be very, very critical of self, like to the point where there was a voice in my head saying you're an idiot or whatever, you know what I mean? And now I'm just like, you know, you did fine there. Like, and then when you start being nice to yourself, you start to like yourself. And when you start to like yourself, you don't want to hurt yourself anymore. And you're like, hey, what the hell am I doing? Oh, right, okay, I'm hurting myself. I want to stop that now because I like myself again. And that's kind of the difference to me. I think it was just time, and everyone's different. Everyone's got their own lives, and you can't apply my template to your own circumstances. You just can't, because we're all very unique in that sense. That was me. And the accent.
What's different about me? Yeah, I mean, I wonder that because I feel like as much insight as I've gotten over the years about why I wanted to transition and all of that, it's really hard to kind of imagine how you would get someone else kind of from there to here. Because I turned back from transition really pretty quickly. I was transitioning for 2 years. I was only on the hormones and didn't turn back soon enough that I didn't have any permanent physical effects, which I'm always very grateful for. And yet it did take me many years after that to just not want to keep like diminishing everything that was masculine about me, or to not like have this just tendency to like revert to imagining myself as a woman. That took time, so there's a lot of it that is just time. But I think that I think that a lot of it was partly how detached I had been from people, which is not, I mean, that's a little bit of an unfortunate part of the reality of it, is that, I mean, I never was like part of a trans community, really. I mean, there was things like that at my school, but I wasn't like deeply involved. I never really, you know, have said that it was like the trans cult that sucked me in, although I was certainly still kind of ripe to fall prey to that kind of gender ideology in a way. But I just didn't really have like an attachment to other people reinforcing that on me. And I just always I was always kind of like excessively emotionally independent, you know, of my family, of friends, just kind of just a very like detached sort of person. And I think that actually, in a way, made it possible for me to reflect on my own experience in a way that eventually I said, yeah, it's going to be really embarrassing to admit that I was wrong to transition, but like I care a lot about my own experience of life, and so I'm actually not going to sacrifice all of the other parts of myself other than you know, this one part that I'm fixating on myself with the trans identity. So that's kind of an ambivalent sort of reason why, but I do think that is a big part of why I turned back as soon as I did.
I'm also just thinking about even after you detransition, that now, you're all in a healthy place. So just that piece of it too. How did you get to that healthy place? But Richard?
So I think the difference is uh, I I entertained, and I think this is for the first time in my life, radical self-acceptance, accepting me as I am, accepting what happened to me in the past, recognizing that I'm a work in progress. Um, my past doesn't necessarily define who I am. I'm striving to be a better person every day. I'm learning new things. I am adopting new sets of beliefs that are, beneficial to me, that I deemed useful in my life, useful in my everyday life. And I think another difference is, you know, as it relates to radical self-acceptance, I'm no longer running away from myself. I'm no longer making excuses for, what happened in the past. I take responsibility for everything. Even the transition that I had. Um, I'm not like constantly blaming. I'm not blaming the doctors. I'm not blaming people. I'm not fixated on doing that anymore. I don't see it as useful for me, and I don't think it's useful for anybody else. Um, yeah, I'm growing up. I'm, becoming an adult, and mentally, finally, I've always entertained this kid self of mine. Like I've always saw myself as a kid, as a delinquent, somebody who was kind of rebellious, didn't care about authority, wanted to do their own thing, wanted to run away um, from responsibilities. Most likely because, like, my dad. I imitated my dad a lot. I imitated my deceased brother, and you know, they never took responsibility for anything. They did whatever they wanted to do, and they felt emboldened to do so, and they made a lot of irrational, decisions, based on however they felt at any given time. They made very impulsive decisions. One thing that I'm actually improving on is I'm no longer making impulsive decisions. Like I'm thinking things through before, I make a decision to actually do them or execute them. And I think this is a healthy frame of mind. This is a healthy direction. I welcome it. So that's about it.
Thank you. I, I just want to thank all of you for your inspiration. I mean, it brings me energy to remember to have gratitude in my life, and you guys bring strength to me, and I'm guessing the same to the audience. So thank you so much.
Now we're going to switch our panel to our female panel. So I'm going to ask our males to sit in the audience. We're going to switch and have our female panelists come up. I'll introduce them one by one. Pamela has agreed. Please say thank you to all the panelists who just served. Thank you. They're going to be back for an encore of the Q&A that will come later. Right now, there's a parent going around. She's giving out some index cards. I believe you all have pens. So please write down any questions. At the end of this female panel, we're going to be collecting those questions, giving them to Pamela so that she can ask them to the full panel of 8 participants. So right now, I want to introduce our next panel. I want to start with Daisy. Daisy's local to this area. It's pretty great. Daisy and I met and had a couple of hours of chat, and I hope we keep doing that. It was pretty wonderful. How do you say your last name, Daisy? How do you say it? Strongin? Strongin. Daisy Strongin is a 26-year-old wife and stay-at-home mom. When Daisy was in her junior year of high school, she socially transitioned at the age of 17. She then started taking testosterone at 18 and had a double mastectomy at 20. She decided to detransition in May of 2020. Shortly after, she met her husband-to-be, Jason, and they married in December of 2021 and had their first child, Gabriel, in August of 2022. 18 months later, they had a daughter, Lila, who I met in February of 2024. Daisy has been dedicated the past 4 years to her vocation as a wife and mother and advocating for detransition awareness. Welcome, Daisy. You all are going to have to scoochie the chairs. I think you can manage. Our next, Alleva? Alleva. I'm going to do this to Camille, too. Michelle Alleva lives in Ontario, Canada. She enjoys line dancing, writing, karaoke, photography, and connecting with nature. Michelle reconciled with her womanhood at the end of 2020 after identifying as transgender for 10 years. Her writing can be found at her website in the program. Please welcome Michelle. Kiefel? Jeez. Camille Kiefel struggled with gender after childhood trauma. After years of severe mental illness, Camille believed that transitioning would finally provide relief. After developing complications from the non-binary top surgery, doctors became dismissive, forcing Camille to take her health into her own hands. After addressing her physical health, her mental health finally started to improve. Camille now advocates for an investigation and holistic approach to gender dysphoria. She founded Detrans Help, and there's information about Detrans Help in the back, a nonprofit that is providing education and resources for detransitioners. Camille has been featured in the Daily Mail, Newsweek, Psychiatric Times, Tucker Carlson, and the Benjamin Boyce podcast. Please welcome Camille. I feel like I should have one of those big football things that they run through. Chloe Cole is a poised and articulate 19-year-old young woman, passionately advocates against the practice of transitioning minors. Driven by a noble mission to safeguard children from potentially harmful ideologies and medical interventions, Chloe draws from her personal experiences to shed light on the distressing consequences of gender-affirming care for adolescents. Having embarked on her own transition journey at the tender age of 12, only to subsequently detransition at 16, Chloe speaks with firsthand authority on the deeply traumatic effects experienced by minors undergoing such treatments. Welcome, Chloe. Maia Poet is a 24-year-old Israeli-American writer, researcher, and public speaker. She began identifying as transgender at the age of 12. At 20, she moved to the Middle East, hoping to transition far away from her non-affirming parents. For 4 years, she lived stealth as a man within communities of Palestinian Muslims and Orthodox Jews in Israel. Living through Middle Eastern wars caused Maia to understand the impracticalities of transition. Consequently, she desisted from a trans identity, which lasted for half her life. Maia now reflects on her experience of desistance, hoping to provide insight for gender-distressed young people and for their parents. Welcome, Maia. What's going to happen now is something kind of odd. The males have sucked up a bunch of the talking time, which is the opposite of what is normally true. But Pamela is going to do an excellent job with questions. And then, I mean, you all listened to what just happened here with the panelists who were up here before. So I put this in Pamela's hands. Thank you again, Pamela. I appreciate it.
I only got to ask half the questions I prepared.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start with the same question, and then you guys are going to get different questions. So to start, I want to hear about what you've been up to lately, and what's something interesting about you that we don't already know, and it could be something unrelated to gender. Where did the other microphones go? Well, wait, she wanted her own.
Mitchell just told me to give my mic to somebody.
I just don't want to share mine because my son gave me a disease. So.
The mic game. Go ahead. Go ahead, Maya.
Well, within the last year, I've detransitioned, which is kind of crazy. I've also survived war. And since really having a near-death experience with almost being at a music festival that was invaded by terrorists, I've now realized that there's really no reason to fear anything. And so now I'm out here speaking out against one of what I think is the most dangerous and destructive ideologies of our time. And yeah, I guess I'm beginning a new life, recovering from everything I've experienced, not just with the wars, but with 12 years of gender lies, of which I don't know which has been the most catastrophic. So I'm just trying to recover from all of that, and I really appreciate all of you for being here in this event and for all of my friends as well. So getting to meet new people, enjoying everybody's company, and a lot of playing with cats.
Cats rule.
As you should be, honestly. As many of you may know, I've been pretty busy for the past 2 years of my life, just been focusing on my advocacy work, testifying in different state legislatures and giving my testimony to different communities across the country. But I've had a little bit more time in the past month to just sit back and relax a little bit. I've had more time to spend with my family and friends, and I actually recently took a trip up to Oregon and to Washington to visit some friends of mine, including Maya.
Yeah, so I've been doing some art. As you may see, I have some artwork that's available for purchase back there. We've been working on the nonprofit Detrans Help. I also started working again. I hadn't been working due to severe mental illness, so I've been able to recover enough to be able to start my job. So just getting back on my feet and watching film and whatnot. So
in the last 6 months, I had probably one of my biggest accomplishments is I finally got my driver's license. I'm 36. So that was something that I planned. At the beginning of the year, I was like, I got to get my driver's license this year. So that's happened. And other than that, I'm not really doing a whole lot except just line dancing. That's about it.
Well, as you heard in my bio, I just had 2 kids, like one after the other, so I've been kind of locked in with that. So yeah, they're really young. They're 21 months and almost 4 months, so that kind of takes up all of my attention. Yeah, just recently bought a house back in August, so kind of settling into Naperville because I only live like 20 minutes from here, and kind of just getting started with building my family. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing. I've been taking piano lessons and trying to learn how to play the piano and learning how to cook and just being very domestic. So it's been fun and crazy.
Okay, I also want to ask you all this question. Is your moments of glory? What stands out as your moment of glory? A special moment, maybe the first time you met somebody in person, or you met a group in person, a certain rally you were at, a certain bill that passed. What is your moment of glory that really stands out for you, that was special?
Oh, so it's me?
Sorry. Go ahead, Michelle.
Start. It's hard to say. There's been a lot of different moments that have been really good. Every time I get together with other detransitioners, that's always the best time. So every single one of those times, every time I meet someone different, those are all really special to me. I think probably my favorite event was I got invited to the University of Notre Dame. That was my very first event that I was ever invited to, and that was really exciting for me because the club that invited me took me all over the campus, and we looked at the basilica, and we looked at like literally everything on campus, and it was just a really good experience to have, like, for my very first experience, to have a really good experience. So I think about that a lot, my very first one. So I think that's it. That's my favorite.
I guess as a moment that stands out is actually when Maya was talking about how being in Killarney actually made you detransition. And I was like, oh, like what I'm actually saying is reaching people, because for the longest time I felt like I was just, you know, you just get a lot of flack and you don't hear anything. And then it's just like, oh yeah, this is actually making a difference. Like people are listening and it is helping. So.
I mean, it's really hard to say because I've been to so many places and I've met so many people, and I've been to a lot of these, frankly, very historical events. Like, I was recognized in Florida during the State of the State address about a year or so back by Governor DeSantis. I was invited by the Speaker of the House this year to the State of the Union address, which was, it just felt so unreal to be part of something like that. And earlier this year, I was there watching the override of the governor of Ohio's veto of Bill 68. It's just, it really just feels, I'm in the situation that I never thought I ever would be earlier in my life. Just all of these different like historical places and events. I kind of feel, it feels like I'm Forrest Gump, just like randomly appearing in these historical events. But honestly, like none of that really means as much to me as, I mean, every first time in every event where I meet with other detransitioners and my other friends who have gone through the same journey with me. Because the bond that we have is unlike pretty much any other that I've had in my life. And I never thought that I would be getting as close with Partners for Ethical Care and with Jeanette Cooper as I am now. But I'm so thankful to call you my friend, Jeanette.
So this is my first panel. Is there something wrong with this mic? Can you all hear me? I can definitely hear you, so that's good. So this is my first ever panel. The only other speaking engagement I've done on this topic was a couple months ago at Detrans Awareness Day rally in Sacramento. Chloe invited me there, and I got on a plane the same day, and I didn't even know that I would speak at the event. I just kind of wrote the speech on the car ride there. So I just whipped something up in 10 minutes, gave a speech, and people really went for it. And maybe that's because my in-car editors were amazing. You know, lots of very smart people on this panel, as you can tell. And I would say that my biggest moment of glory so far within my very short, so far time speaking out about this issue has really been, you know, I've done some interviews with different creators online, and when I read through some of the comments, and I get some comments, you know, stating something to the fact of, I've never heard anybody else articulate this specific experience in the way that you have, or people who say, I've never thought about this before. I've never thought about this specific nuance in this broad range of issues. And for me, that's a moment, you know, that's where I feel my biggest moment of glory, because then it makes me realize that actually I do have a unique voice and a unique set of experiences that although most of my transition story played out in a Middle Eastern war zone, it turns out that despite that fact, a lot of people can relate to the turmoil or to the factors that got me into transition, or even possibly take something away from my story, even though it happened in many ways all the way across the world.
I think one moment for me that sticks out is I think one of the first events that I ever went to that has to do with this is the premiere of a film that I was a part of called Disconnected. It was made by a guy named Don Johnson. He's a Catholic documentary filmmaker. Wasn't Catholic at the time. I was just talking about how I was detransitioned and I was pregnant with my first child at the time. And I went to Anaheim, California. That was the first time I met Chloe there. And that was really, I think, the first time I ever met detransitioners that I had met like online. And I think what sticks out about it is just kind of just realizing like, wow, people are very like deeply affected by these types of stories, because the film kind of started with me in one of my old YouTube videos back after I had gotten the double mastectomy, and I was really happy about it, and I was kind of documenting the journey with that, and it was very it was like right in the beginning of the film, and it was very personal, and it was very like jarring, and I was in the audience watching my past self with just these giant black scars under my chest, looking into the camera and just smiling like a psychopath, and like all these people around me, I'm like, what are they like? It was a bizarre experience, but it was a really good one because oh no, oh no, I guess they're kicking us out. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, just people came up to me after that and were, talking about how deeply moved they were. And people were saying that online, but I feel like hearing it in person was kind of like, wow, this really does deeply affect not just people who go through it, but also parents and grandparents and teachers. And just, it's something that really hits at like the core of who we are, and kind of like it has rippling effects on other people. And it's very, very common, as it turns out. So, and also another part of that trip was I actually did an actual protest, like in the street, with other detransitioners, and we were holding up signs and kind of chanting things, and that was really that was really out of my comfort zone, to be honest. It was a new experience for me. I never really thought I'd be doing something like that. It was, but I normally don't really like this word, but I found it to be empowering. And I think I kind of resist things that are empowering for whatever reason. So maybe that's why it was out of my comfort zone, because I was really kind of like standing there physically saying like, I oppose this, all you random people passing by. So, but I think it was good. I think it was good for me, so.
I was there, and that was one of the first times I was on stage with you, Daisy, and I was so choked up from your story, and you had just had your baby, and the film highlighted that. I just resented the fact that I would be on stage, because all I wanted to do was just like cry happy tears for what was happening, and the emotion of everybody meeting each other for the first time. It was pretty profound. Anyway. Okay, so next question. For many, I hear that the beginning of detransition is the most difficult time. It's when you have to admit to yourself and others that you made a horrible mistake. But despite all of that, I see so much growth and recovery among you. What would current you say to past you during the moments when you first detransitioned? Is there anything you wish you did differently after you detransitioned? And what lessons have you learned in the last few years? Who would like to start? Sure.
I'm very new to detransitioning, as it were. It's been like less than a year for me. So it's basically, I was trans identified for half of my life. And I guess I would tell people who were in the position that I was in less than a year ago to first and foremost have compassion for yourself, because you made a decision, probably the best decision you could have made with the information that you had. The problem is that the information that you had is inadequate and built on a stack of lies and false premises. And logical obfuscations and institutions who have been captured by bad, unevidenced ideas. That is not your fault. It is unfortunately incredibly harmful, and like psychologically, physically, developmentally. I mean, I would really say also, I guess, that most people, I assume, barring extreme circumstances, are pretty rational actors. But in order to be the most rational actor and to be the most logical actor, you do have to have facts. And unfortunately, these doctors and the entire, medical industry at the moment is basically misinforming people about the nature of their condition. And there's not a single person of any background, no matter how sort of mentally together or, no matter how many sort of comorbid conditions, mental and physical, that somebody has, nobody under those circumstances in which they're being fundamentally lied to about the nature of their distress can make an informed decision. And so that really is not on you. So, yeah.
So one major problem that I had during the very, very early stages of my detransition that I often see with a lot of, especially young or early on female detransitioners as well, is that you look at all these changes that have happened to your body from being on hormones or from having had your puberty blocked or from undergoing either the double mastectomy or the genital surgeries. And you want to address all of it with further surgery because you haven't still gotten out of the trans mindset. You see all of these differences in your body as something that has to be fixed still with physical interventions. When I first went off of hormones, my body image was just horrific. My face and my body were still very masculine. I had like a lot of muscle in my body. My face was very gaunt. My shoulders, my cheekbones, my jaw, my nose, my brow bone, all were prominent. And you know what I wanted to do? I wanted to have more surgery to address all of this. I didn't just want to have a breast reconstruction. I wanted to shave bones out of my face, off of my shoulders. I wanted to get fat grafted from different areas of my body into my chest, into my hips and thighs, to try and emulate a more feminine, soft, curvy appearance. But that's not at all how you can address those feelings, because you're not fixing anything. The problem is not with the way that you look. You have to be able to look at your body, including everything that has been changed or whatever has been lost, and to be able to accept that, yes, this is what I have now. Because yes, these changes are representative of the horrible things that you have been through. But one day, you should also be able to look back at this and see it as, this is a part of my story. This is something that I have survived, and it's a symbol of my strength. You have to learn to radically accept the changes in your life that you cannot leave behind.
So, and my story is a little weird because I didn't detransition right away, but I developed a lot of health complications while I was still identifying as non-binary. And what I'd like to say to myself back then is that the doctors first off, doctors aren't perfect. And sometimes they're wrong. And sometimes they're going to gaslight you. And I remember taking sertraline, and I go into the doctor's office with bumps, red bumps on my arms. And I'm like, I think this is from the sertraline. And he says, I need you to continue taking the medication, even though I think it's a systemic rash. And so I was going through all these health issues, and my doctors would continue to tell me to do things that were continue to harm me, and I had to make decisions on my own, and that was very difficult. And I wish the medical system wasn't the way it was. I wish that they weren't encouraging transition as a first source. Like, there was a young man who reached out to Detrans Help, and he says he wants to opt out of gender. He wants nothing to do with sex, and he's struggling with suicidal ideation, depression, and the first thing they're telling him is that he should consider transition. They're not looking at any potential underlying health issues or mental health issues that may be causing these issues. So I wish I could say that the medical system is structured, but there's a lot of flaws in the medical system. So that's what I would tell myself.
I have two things that I would tell myself, and the first is sort of riffing off of what Chloe was saying also, which is that immediately after detransitioning, one of the first things that sort of comes to mind is this idea of how do I fix this? And a lot of people do kind of turn to surgery to look at, like, what are the surgeries that could fix all of this? You know, do I do something to my voice so that my pitch is higher again? I ended up on like different subreddits that are for women that are quote unquote looks maxing. So it's basically doing different cosmetic procedures and surgeries to like look the best that you can possibly look. And that was not a good place to be. So looking back on that, I would say to myself, just slow, do everything really, really, really slow. If you feel like after years and years that you don't think you can live with something that has changed, then think about it, but don't make any decisions in the first however long. To myself, I would have said like 2 years. Don't. I still need more time to think about it, to be honest. And then the other thing would be that I would tell myself to get out of my house more. I spent way too much time on the internet. I still spend too much time on the internet. But I spent so much time, even if I'm not with other people, I spent so much time indoors. And I think it's just really, really important to be outdoors. It's really, really important to be engaging your body and not, that's what the internet is bad for, is dissociating. You're removing yourself from your body and being in your head all the time. So that would be the other thing I would tell myself.
So I detransitioned kind of right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. It was May of 2020. So I was spending a lot of time inside and on the internet. So, in terms of what I would tell myself practically, I would say, get a hobby, put your phone down, like make something to take your mind off of this, because it was really, I was in denial about it for a long time, year and a half. Maybe you could probably argue more than that, because the whole time in my transition, I was just kind of obsessed with not detransitioning. As they say, death before detransition. I took that literally. So when I realized that I was going to detransition, there was really no other option. I thought that just the regret alone would kill me. Because, I have this deep voice, I have no breasts, all the same things that people worry about, who's gonna, want to be with me, are people gonna like look at me weird every time I open my mouth and things like that. And it's like, oh, I did this to myself. So I think what I would tell myself is to trust God and try to forgive yourself. And to this day, I don't totally know what it looks like. Like, I don't know when I know, like, oh, I've forgiven myself. Because I do still think about it, and I do still think about, like, man, it's crazy that I did that. But I also gave my life to Christ, like, right when I detransitioned. It kind of happened at the same time. So I would say, like, if you're trying to be like God, it's like God forgives you. So if you want to be like God, you have to be forgiving too, not just of other people, but you have to forgive yourself. You can't hold on to this self-hatred that you've grown so comfortable with, for your whole life. So that's what I would say. And I would also say, like, be prepared, because your life is about to take a really different turn than you think it's going to take. Because I was very aimless at the time that I was like, late 2019, I was in college. I wasn't, really that career oriented. I knew that I wanted to have a family. That became more important to me. I didn't know, like, how or when that was going to happen. So yeah, I would say just simply trust God and try to be godly through forgiving yourself. So.
Okay, this is a good one. I'd like to hear from each of you how you envision the gender industry coming down. What do you think will really make that house of cards fall?
I think it'll be gradual. I think just more of what's happening, really, like with the sports teams and bathrooms, and people are just kind of starting to, average people are just kind of starting to see it and think, I don't really see how this is going to work. I don't really see how in any universe it's fair for a biological male to play on a women's sports team. It just, and we're seeing practical results from that, like, pretty rapidly, and it's kind of getting to a point where it is actually just absurdity. But at the same time, it's like, we're a small enough group of people, and when I say we, I mean people who are confused about their gender. I mean, I'm not confused about it now, but people who have been, people who, want to transition and really try to integrate themselves into society with the opposite sex. But no, I think it'll be gradual. I think we're headed in a more sane direction, for sure. I think also just a lot more young people are, like, kind of more attracted to tradition and conservatism and just religion too. And I think that's kind of, I think the next generation, like younger Gen Z, Gen Alpha, is going to be different. They're going to have a very different way of thinking about the world and interpreting it. So.
It's already coming down, the industry. I just had something in my head and then it came out of my head. I can't remember exactly what I was going to say. Is it okay if I pass it off? I'll come back to it in a second.
Yeah.
So I think part of it's going to be when people actually see the harm that's been done to detransitioners and the lack of help that they get. I've reached out to WPATH as Detrans Help and to the WHO, trying to start a dialogue on this, saying that, look, detransitioners aren't getting help. And also, there's all these different minority groups that have been impacted by this. And neither of those organizations responded to us. No surprise, but this is the reality, is that detransitioners are being harmed. There's no ICD-10 code, which is a medical classification code for detransition. So what that means is that if detransitioners do get covered under gender affirming care, is that they just show up as another gender affirming care treatment. And so there's no way to document us. And this whole entire situation is a huge scandal. So I think that that's going to be part of it. I mean, there's a man who reached out to Detrans Help, and he can't get access to testosterone. He's like, I've detransitioned, I've had genital reassignment surgery, so I no longer can produce testosterone, and I can't get access to testosterone. They want to give me estrogen. Like, Planned Parenthood wants to give me estrogen. Everybody else wants to give me estrogen. None of these trans organizations will help me. And so he reached out to us because nobody else is helping him. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know anybody off the top of my head in New York State that can help him. And so I think that's a huge issue, is that there's no medical sources. We don't have that network yet. And so people are being denied the medical care they need, detransitioners are, and it's not going to look good, especially since when it gets out there that we've tried to initiate dialogue, this is just going to be a huge scandal.
I think we're already starting to see the end of this. Speaking from my experience in the movement, the way I see it, the end of this will be when there no longer is any country or state or region on the entire earth where children are ever being transitioned. And where we aren't pushing this model, where the gender affirmative care model of care is not being followed, and we aren't just pushing patients, adults, or children. It is very one-sided, one-track-minded pipeline. That being said, I think there are multiple stages to this battle. Once we address the children and the changing of the model to a more, I think, holistic approach to gender dysphoria, we're going to have to address those of us who have already been hurt by this. Because as it is right now, there are no standards of care for those of us who regret our transitions or choose to detransition. There aren't even codes to bill for the medical the medical complications that we get from these treatments, whether it be the puberty suppressants, the cross-sex hormones, any other medications involved, the surgeries. We turn to our doctors and they have no idea what to do with us. And because of that, many are scared to even consider detransitioning because they don't think that there is a way out, because they see how other people who detransition are treated when their doctors turn their cheek the other way. We need to change that. We need to start studying those of us who detransition, and doctors and psychiatrists and counselors need to start working with us. And I think the battle doesn't just end with that either. If anything, this has exposed major flaws in our institutions, namely that just how easily they can become ideologically or profit-driven. And if we don't face that, we might as well not be fighting at all.
So gender medicine started out as a medical, well, at least a scandalous medicine, at least as medicine that, you know, didn't play by the same rules. I think gender medicine in general has entirely done away with the concept of the null hypothesis. I think that, you know, this medicine, when these treatments were being pioneered in the Netherlands, before, you know, before American culture and American activists exported this ideology first throughout the English-speaking world broadly and now towards other countries, you know, this started out as scandalous medicine that didn't play by the rules of evidence, evidence-based, of proper clinical trials, just doing experimental medicine, you know, outside of experimental conditions. But the reason we're gathered here in this room is not just because of a medical scandal, because, you know, if the medical scandal were like the crux or the most, I guess, scary thing about this entire crisis that we've gotten ourselves into, then I assume that it would have been handled, you know, many decades before. But this issue of not just gender medicine, but gender ideology in general, it has blown up to the point where it has subsumed every single institution within Western society. It has systematically weakened our institutions through lies, through logical obfuscations, and through the same tools that allow fascists to rise to power within democratic institutions. Like this. And this ideology has successfully clawed its way into every single Western institution. And so the way I see this issue is that it's not just a poor medicine issue. It's beyond that. This ideology has captured our court systems. It's captured education. It has captured, I mean, even the ways in which different, you know, medical specialists within their evidence-based societies are allowed to discuss these treatments and to discuss the efficacy or the lack thereof, or the evidence or the lack thereof, which is an integral part of what allows for for medicine to be practiced in a proper and ethical way. These safeguards have been totally done away with. Of course, there's the issue of the sex-based spaces for women and sports and things of that nature. Like this ideology, you know, it is like this. I guess this backlash against the transgender movement has often been compared to, for example, the repressed memories epidemic, or to the scandal of lobotomies. But like that's only the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about a massive sort of shift within Western society, and allowing this movement of trans ideology into every one of our institutions, and not nipping it in the bud when it really needed to be, has allowed for this, you know, the trans movement. From somebody who used to be on the inside, I can tell you one thing that I think not as many people talk about, which is the fact that the trans movement, it doesn't just have, you know, goals to harm little groups of people here and there. Like it fundamentally has a goal to subvert sovereignty. I mean, they have their own flag. They have their own flag. They are trying to become their own caliphate. They are trying to. It is an international crisis. It started in the Netherlands. You know, the ideology really took off in the United States, who proliferated it to the rest of the world and internally within its own institutions. It started with the English-speaking world. It is now going to poor countries where, if you can imagine, the outcomes of people who choose this path will be even more abysmal than in first world countries. And so I think that it's going to have to start with the countries who started enrolling these treatments, namely like the Netherlands, other Scandinavian countries in Europe. They're going to start to roll this back because they've seen this horrific experiment play out in real time, and they're going to wake up. And I think that, you know, for the United States, it's going to be more difficult. Like I think that because there are so many different states, and each state is kind of like its own country in a way, it's going to take more time. But the fact that there are constitutional protections for free speech is integral here. And by rolling back all of the damage that trans ideology has done to, you know, Western institutions, I think it'll be really important to do that, not only for the future of, you know, free speech, but for the future of democracy in general. And the threat of loss of free speech, I think, is what propels everybody in this room to fight against this horrible ideology.
Can I answer?
We are not menstruators. We
No.
are not people with vulvas. We are women.
Sorry, because I didn't answer before. I'm going to keep it quick, though. Basically, we have a political pendulum that's swinging left and right, and I think what's happened is we've gone too far left. And as we go further and further left, we get to a point where everybody knows a trans person, and I think that's sort of how we got where we are now. Everyone kind of knows someone, and we're going to swing back when everybody knows a detransitioner. Yeah.
Okay, since we're running low on time, I'm just going to ask one more question. And it is, what gives you the most hope and strength?
All right. Well, I think what gives me the most hope is the fact that events like this exist. I mean, the first bit of hope that I got was really just in the aftermath of like surviving terrorist attacks. I mean, the fact that if I was able to survive terrorist attacks like on multiple occasions, always by some random coincidence, then the fact that we're having organized, informed discussions with experts from various fields who are analyzing the evidence base, finding the holes in this, also the detransitioners speaking out, like all of us, we're kind of like a family, you know? I mean, we talk to each other all the time, and I've never had such close friendships in my life as I do with the people on the stage, the people in the audience, and the people who are on the other side of Twitter, you know? Like, you guys really like have all of my detrans friends and all of the people in the gender space that I've met have been the most instrumental people in my life of not only helping to unindoctrinate myself from half a lifetime of gender lies, but also to recover from the aftermath of surviving, you know, the worst terrorist attack to afflict the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And for me, both of these experiences have been deeply, deeply traumatic. And the biggest hope that I get in being able to recover from both of those extremely intense experiences are really all of you, frankly.
I feel very similarly to Maya, and that's a lot of what gives me hope is these other detransitioners and these sisters and these parents and family members and other men and women who are in this fight with us, and just watching all the progress that this movement that we're part of has made just within the past 2 to 3 years. We're at a point now at which I think it's 26 states now have passed some form of ban on the usage of puberty blockers or any sort of medicalization or transitioning of minors here in the States. The countries that have pioneered these treatments are going back on their decision to use the gender affirmative care model, especially in children. And we're starting to see a societal shift in public opinions on this, not only in terms of like the women's spaces issue, parental rights notification, and of course the medical transitioning of children as well as adults. And it's these experiences, these other people who I've met, who I've almost formed these familial bonds with, that have really kept me going. And it's also my own family, and seeing how we came out of the hell that we were in all together. It's my mom, my dad, my big brothers and sisters, and all my loved ones who keep me going.
What gives me hope is, well, courage is courageous, and it's because of all the detransitioners here that there is more awareness to this issue. And I've it's, I talked to family members and I've talked to other people who, friends and such, and I've been able to see a shift in how they think of this issue. And so that does give me hope that things are changing. And then also all the policy that's been going on, like to stop transitioning children, all the particularly red states. And I do see people, I am actually working with somebody in Oregon because Oregon's been a very tricky state. And I've been working with him, and it gives me hope because it's like, yes, there are people in these states that do care and they do want to make things better, and they want to change these very harmful policies.
I wrote two things down, and the first one was that one of the things that gives me hope is knowing that the real world is not the internet. The internet's not the real world. And well, it is and it isn't. It's true, but it's what I mean when I write that is sort of being on social media all the time. You get the extremes of everything. You get the people that talk to you are people who have something to say, and sometimes that's not a great thing. It's very polarized, but in the real world, pretty much every time I've had an experience with someone talking about this, as long as I take something that's sort of like nuanced and sort of middle ground when I'm like sort of feeling it out, they're always on my side, always. So it's, I'm always worried when I'm bringing it up because I feel like it's more polarized than it actually is, but almost everyone at least everyone agrees that transition, if it's ever going to be a thing, it has to be a last resort. Everyone will agree with you on that. I don't think it should be a thing at all, but we can't get everyone on the same page, but at least you can find some kind of middle ground with pretty much everyone. The other thing I wrote is just similar. Life is never really what you expect it to be. I feel like I try and predict a lot of things. When I was detransitioning, I tried to predict when I'm going to start passing, quote unquote, passing as a woman better. And I got called sir with a full face of makeup 3 days ago when I was in the airport. So you never know. For better or for worse, you never know. But I also got called ma'am earlier that day. So it's a weird world to be out there in, but for the most part, it's better than everything that I expected to be. So that's what gives me hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think with this issue specifically, I had a lot of hope for where we're headed as a collective. I think despite the fact that it's taken over, all of our major institutions, I think it's not really where the American people stand. I think that's just becoming more and more clear, and events like this and actually talking to people face to face and not just on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, just reminds me of that. And obviously as a Christian, like my hope is in God and is in Christ, and that there's a lot of news, there's a lot of stuff that comes up when we're doing the doom scroll, the daily doom scroll, that is just like, wow, is this really happening? Like, like you feel so helpless, but one day everything will be made right. And when I say everything, I mean like all suffering, it will all be gone one day. So yeah, that's where my hope is in ultimately. So
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. So we have a few questions from the audience. We're going to bring the guys up, and we are going over time.
Yeah, we're going to bring the gentleman back up to the stage, so I'm going to ask them to do that. Just walk up right now. Please thank the ladies. Gentlemen, you may have to find some of your own chairs. As you do that, I'm going to ask Shannon Adcock of Awake, Illinois, to come up because we were both put on the same map recently, and it's kind of a claim to fame for us. And I think Shannon might talk a little bit about that. Shannon's doing some great things in Illinois. I want her to just inspire you and give you a little bit more information about things that you can actually do to take action right here in Illinois. Shannon.
Thanks, Jeanette. Thank you so much to Partners for Ethical Care for hosting this event. I don't know if you noticed, but we did have some police here tonight. I think you're aware that in this country, there is a very real effort to cancel the truth. And what I think is pretty amazing is that tonight, they tried to cancel all of you hearing these amazing, amazing voices. And so tonight is a huge, huge victory. Round of applause for that win. So I think that, when you look at advocates around the country, what we've realized through the last few years is that we could have put our own families into our own ideological crown royal bags and closed the strings shut and said, sink or swim, everybody. But what we've realized is that parents across this country do not feel they have the allies with them to stand in the gap between their children and any effort to harm them or to indoctrinate them. And so I launched Awake Illinois here in this state because as hopeful as it is that there are many states that have awakened to this, Illinois is going to be one of the last. And I think that we have to really own that and realize that the fight here in this state is significant. So Jeanette came onto our live stream, Protect the Kids live stream earlier this year because House Bill 4876 was put into legislature. It was filed. They were going to vote on it. It didn't get there yet because voices like Jeanette, voices from the gay community, voices from the faith community, voices from the medical community came together to say, we're going to protect these kids. What that bill was going to do was basically say that parents who do not permit their children to go on puberty blockers, to sterilize themselves, to mutilate themselves, those parents would have been considered criminals. It would have changed the code of child abuse to make those parents become criminals. Parents who parent ethically are not criminals. And so what I want to encourage you to do is to stop thinking of advocacy in these days, as Michelle said, very polarizing. Do not think of it as political. Partners for Ethical Care, think of it as ethical. It is right versus wrong. It is not that complicated. And so when you think to yourself, what is my entry-level step that I can take? Or what is the entry-level step my neighbor can take? My faith pastor, whatever it may be, your entry-level step is to say, not something, not tell them something, but to pose a question. Have you heard of detransitioners? Wow, I did. I listened to them, and I hope that you will listen to them too. Easy peasy. So I'll let them continue. Please evangelize the truth. You guys in this state, we need so many strong warriors for these kids. So if you multiply what you've heard today through your networks, in your Bible study, at garden club, book club, wherever you are, that is going to be contagious. So rock on. Thanks, guys.
I'm just sorting through the questions, and I see many of them are similar. So I'm going to try to combine the one that is asked over and over again. And it was asked on the internet too, and I asked what to ask the panel. And I know that they answer this question a lot, but I'm gonna ask it again. Okay, so let me read from this. Okay. I cannot affirm my son as my daughter. I love my son. I am afraid that my refusal to affirm him will cause him to dig in further. Is there anything or any advice? Is there anything I can do as a parent? let me read this, my glasses. Is there anything or any advice? Is there anything I or any parent can do to help my son reclaim himself? Right now I am and have been completely shunned and estranged. There's a very similar question regarding a daughter, almost the exact same thing, but regarding a daughter. So what advice do you give to parents where their child is in the trans ideology?
There's nothing you can say. There's nothing that you can tell them. There's no, like, words ain't gonna do it, because I have been that daughter that just desperately wants or thinks that they want their mother and their father to not only understand them, but understand them in a way that, like, oh, clearly I should accept you because this is your experience. Like, and my parents, personally, they definitely pushed back. And we had many, many, many discussions about it where, you know, like, I remember them saying things like, why can't you just be a masculine woman? Like, you know that you're never going to actually be male, so, like, why even try? And I didn't have an answer, really. I all I had was, like, how I felt. And I couldn't possibly think, like, I was 17. I thought that I was an adult. I thought that I had lived, you know, I thought that I had had a lot of experience, you know, in life. Because, yes, I had been through pain, you know, but I just couldn't see. So, but there are things that you can do in your child's life. Like, don't try to talk about it all the time. Because, like I said, there's nothing that you can say, and, you know, it's just gonna, you know, probably end up in an argument, or and even though I'm sure you feel very passionately that your child is not trans, like, telling them over and over again isn't gonna do anything. I would say just try to be, like, normal, be loving, do things with them, show them that you care about them, that you're interested in them and the things that, you know, they're doing and their accomplishments. Don't distance yourselves from them. Look, I've been a parent for 21 months, so I understand that it's ridiculous kind of for me to be giving parents of adult children advice, but you know, I think my parents did quite a good job, even though I did ultimately end up transitioning and, you know, being in that for 5 years. You know, don't give up hope. Just remind your child that you love them, and don't make everything about gender, because, you know, I guarantee you, like, that tension, that sort of unspoken tension is already there. It doesn't need to be brought up anymore. It's like, we know it's there. So, you know, just show your child that you want to see them and that you want to hear them, and you can do that without affirming the harm that they're doing to themselves.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Don't take any shit, by the way. Like, like, you are not a punching bag. You are not there to be abused. If you have, not that this is the answer, but it's a good thing to do anyway, is to build up your own self-esteem and your self-confidence, because it's very hard to argue with somebody who is very strong. But when they're very weak and they're very, not saying that parents are weak, but when you're battered down and you don't know what the hell is happening, and you're confused and you just think you want to do the right thing, then you're going to be an easy target for them to defeat. And a lot of parents do feel defeated because they keep losing these little skirmishes they have with the kids. And I just think, you know, one, I know I was an adult when I did it, but I would still never talk to my parents like that, like ever. Like, and the reason is because I respect them, and the reason I respect them is because they respect themselves, and they've got confidence, they've got self-esteem, and if you have to understand fundamentally this movement relies on people with no self-esteem because they're so easy to separate and take them away and fill the mind up with crap. But if you've got a kid or an adult kid, it doesn't matter how old they are, and you have self-confidence, then it'll rub off on them. And I think that is the major tool here. And I absolutely agree with what Daisy said. Do not bring the topic up unless they bring it up themselves, maybe. But even then, you won't gain anything from discussing the topic itself.
Kind of go a little bit more off of what Ritchie was saying. I know I was struggling with low self-esteem. I was also searching for something. And I think it's interesting. One of the best things that therapist had ever said to me was, Camille, you're digging the hole wider, but you're not digging yourself out of it. And I think that a lot of individuals who are seeking transition, including what I was they're searching for something. I think that also, I'm not a parent, but there are some parents who've had success, like Gabs Clark or Aaron Friday, and they might be more of help. I think too, the age does matter. And I do want to say that when I remember my stepmom was giving me a question, and it wasn't about gender, but it was about something like, I was like, oh, this is progress. And she's like, well, what about this? Is this not, what about just normal heterosexual people? Like, is that bad? And I had to think about it and then I went through all these different things in my head. And I was like, oh yeah, what I'm saying is pretty much saying that heterosexual people are bad. And so it's like, oh, that's not a good thing. That's not what I actually want to say. And so careful questions can sometimes be helpful. I think Peter Boghossian is the one who does that. So those are some different resources to potentially look into.
My book has a few suggested questions. But really what my book says is there is no one size fits all. There is no magic words. You have to know your child. You have to know your family. It depends. It depends. It depends. And it has a lot to do with figuring out what's going on in the dynamic of your family and your child and what their child is coping with. And figuring out what's within yourself. There's so many different variables. And that's basically what my book is about.
So, parents never affirmed me, not for 1 second. I came out as trans at the age of 12 in 2012, so I was really an early adopter, and they didn't affirm me for 1 second. In fact, the reason I ended up in Israel is because my parents basically thought, like, you know, that if I go to a country that doesn't support all of this stuff, that it would somehow, you know, get me out of trans. And in a very roundabout way, it did, but fundamentally, I went to the Middle East because I realized that instead of having to, you know, settle for, you know, being a butch lesbian, I could just live, you know, I could live as, you know, a man, which is the dream I had had ever since I had realized that such a thing was possible. Because fundamentally, what I was struggling with was that I didn't know what was actually going on with me when I came into this trans identity at the age of 12. I didn't know that I was experiencing crushes on girls. I thought that crush was an orange soda, and that the symptoms of the crush were actually symptoms of at least 3 different neurodegenerative diseases suggested to me by WebMD. So my point is that I had no clue what was going on with me. I went through my entire adolescence being entirely confused. I had a bunch of secret girlfriends. I had to sneak around. I had to, because it was not acceptable within my surroundings and by the adults in my life. And what really harmed me the most was the idea that my desire to, for example, wear snazzy combinations of vests and bow ties was somehow in any way as harmful as my desire to mutilate my body and poison it with copious amounts of cross-sex hormones. Like, from my surroundings, both of those things were treated as equally harmful and equally pathological. And so when my parents said to me, you know, you should never try to transition, you're never going to pass as a man, I was like, oh, I'll show you. And I went to a region of the world where they don't know what a lesbian is. And I passed as a man just like that. I mean, most of my friends, like, even though I managed to somehow, like, to not medicalize, the way that I am naturally in the Middle East got me perceived as a guy. And I had a great life. I had such a great life living through that social transition that it actually pushed me closer and closer and closer to medicalizing, because at some point, everybody knows you's guy. And at some point, people will stop believing that you're a guy in his mid-20s. Like, people are willing to suspend disbelief, but only to a certain extent. And I was illegal in Israel for several years before I became a citizen, because the bureaucracy is hellish. And so, yeah, I'm not like Richard. I do blame them. But they helped me. But the fact that the bureaucracy was so hellish gave me 3 years to grow up a little bit and live through 2 wars. And it was only living through war that made me realize how impractical medically it is to be tied to a pharmaceutical industry, especially living in a place where you don't know when the next war is going to break out. You don't know how long supply chains will be impacted for. And one time, like, I missed the bomb shelter by a couple seconds, so I was like hiding under a tree and seeing rockets go over my head. And I was really contemplating my own mortality in that moment. And I just thought, like, you know, wow, this time I really failed in making it to the bomb shelter. Like, I hope one of these rockets doesn't hit me. And then I had this thought of, like, what if I were right now in a hospital, immobilized because of an elective double mastectomy? I can't raise my hands above my shoulders, and then I hear a siren, and I can't run to a bomb shelter. Then what comes of me? Then that's, you know, that type of life and death situation was the only thing, you know, that allowed me to realize that my plan was flawed and to consider a different plan, even though my parents pushed back, even though they never affirmed me, even though I wasn't allowed to come out to anybody else. Like, it was the combination of, you know, a bunch of homophobia that I was dealing with, and really just my own inborn stubbornness, that made me literally go to a war zone where people would automatically perceive me as a guy and I could live the life that I wanted to live. But had I not lived through war, you know, had I not had the luxury of living through war and having that snap me out of this first world problem, I would have never reconsidered this, you know? And so I think that sometimes it takes a really drastic measure to snap your kid out of it. Like, because for me, this was half of my life. So that's a bit of a different situation than if your kid just comes to you within a year or two and says, you know, I'm trans. Like, there's a different thing, but I absolutely echo the advice that was given by the previous panelists. I would take all of their advice into account. And also, sometimes, like, you know, it's not on you if your kid ends up transitioning. Like, you can't, at some point, like, there's an interaction of parent-child relationships and certain dynamics that play out, but it's ultimately not on you, especially when your child becomes an adult. And I mean, I think that the best thing that you can do for your kid is really, like it's been said before, yeah, don't focus on gender, and don't put all of your stake into a nuclear option, because sometimes the nuclear option blows up in your face. And ultimately, like it's been said before, all of you know your kids best. You know, maybe like rely on the advice given by other parents, but don't create your entire guidebook on it, because what you're doing right now is you're using a war strategy. Like, when you're trying to get your kid to desist, you are planning a war strategy. You need as much information as you humanly can get, but also you need to use your intuition, because you've raised this kid for their entire life. And so you need the combination of your intuition as a parent and the war strategies, you know, provided by different therapists and people who have worked with these populations of kids and detransitioners and the like, and combining all of that evidence and using like your intellect, your wit, and your understanding of your child, like that is I think your best shot. And I think, yeah, so thanks for listening to my rant.
I concur. I agree. Is this working? Okay. This is about Illinois. So in Illinois, by the way, this is the exact same thing has already been in California since 2011. In Illinois public schools, it's part of the teacher development that we must accept and adopt this ideology. Illinois passed a law which allows 12-year-olds to see a therapist without knowledge or consent. What advice do you have for parents and teachers in this state? What or how do we protect our children? Do you guys want to answer? I
could answer part two.
Nothing practical. I'm afraid it's just going to be a bit sarcastic, but seriously, if this is you've got to think of it, this is the playing field you're in. If you can't change the playing field, why are you still playing their game? You know, I mean, like,
How do you do it? Give us some good like guerrilla techniques.
yeah, like, I know it's easy for me to say, but I'm not going to suggest it, but and it's easy for me to say, like, to just quit your job or whatever, but if all of the teachers got together on this and started working to reverse it, and then they used their voice confidently, I think that's how you solve it. But it's such a huge legislation is way beyond any of us, by the way, to be frank. Yeah, sorry.
There's a woman named Jessica Tapia. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly, but she just won a lawsuit because they were forcing her to keep secrets in schools in California, and she just won a large sum of money. I would recommend even putting in a form that gender aside, to not allow your child to see a counselor without your permission, because they do that. I know this because I did it years ago in California. The counselors pull kids out of class without the parents' permission. If there's a tragedy in the school, they'll pull them out and probe them for questions, ask them sensitive questions like about suicide, things like that. You need to be involved. You need to know if they're going to do it. Put it in writing. They have to do it when it's in writing. So I would recommend, even aside from the gender, that you be very involved and not allow your school to see a counselor without your involvement. Okay, well, one more question. The question is for you guys, of course. How did your school react to I guess if you were in school, some of you were not, but how did your school react to your social transition, and how did this impact your transition?
So I was in about late 7th grade to early 8th grade when I started to socially transition. I started like slowly, gradually over time, cutting my hair shorter and shorter, dressing a little bit more like the boys around me my age, or like my dad, or like my big brothers, right? Um, and for the most part, I didn't really have any sort of official coming out to most of the students or even like the staff or like teachers around me. Um, I mostly kept it under wraps. And other than like telling a few older students and some closer friends of mine in my grade and online about my newfound identity, I wanted to wait until I was medicalized in high school to start referring to myself, um, to have my name changed in the files and have myself referred to as a boy and as Leo at school. But a lot of the kids who I had come out to, actually, um, they were very mean about it. They were quite mean to me about it. They took it as an opportunity to sort of pick on me because, oh, I mean, I was already a bit of an outcast, right? And this is something that was making me more and more different. Um, so they would really push back, these friends of mine, but not really out of any sort of real concern. It was just another opportunity to bully me. And once I was in 8th grade and I looked even more awkward as I was trying to settle into like boys' clothing, and eventually once I had my puberty blocked and I started actually visibly looking male and developing more of a masculine voice. This continued beyond my friend group, and there were kids who would like basically like talk crap and like right in front of my face and just pick on me. There was this one kid, actually, who throughout that school year had been like, when he would talk to me, he would emphasize the fact that I was a girl. He would call me names. He would call me stupid. He would call me like gay slurs. And eventually he started to like physically harass and assault me. He started spitting on me. He started tripping me. And then it started to really escalate. Like he would feel like my arms or my legs and tell me like, wow, you're starting to develop a lot of muscle. And eventually one day he had gone too far and he had sexually assaulted me in the classroom. He groped and squeezed one of my breasts. And this was when I was pre-binding. So I hadn't really been making an effort to really hide my breasts because by that point in time, it was like, I mean, I thought like, like I'm already medically transitioning. I'm already like fairly well into my social transition. So I'm not going to bother until I'm in high school to start hiding that part of me because everybody knows that everybody's known me since I was in elementary school. Everybody knows that I'm still biologically female. But that broke all of that for me. That was when I really started to want to hide that part of me. I wanted to further pursue medical transition. I thought there was no stopping. I was afraid now of that part of my body, of anybody even recognizing the fact that I was a female and that I was a girl, because I was afraid of that repeating itself ever again. And that was when I really started to view my femininity and my sex as a weakness and something that I should be ashamed of and something that I should fear. And ultimately, it's those experiences like that where people were aggressive to me, even to the point of assault, that pushed me further and further down the path of transition.
Anybody else?
So I socially transitioned when I was a junior in high school, and this was in 2015. So it was sort of in its the new wave of the trans thing. It was sort of in its infancy, and I think really in my senior year is when I really was like, okay, I'm just gonna try to use the men's bathroom, and I'm not gonna be in female locker rooms, and I want my name in the yearbook to say Oliver and not Daisy, and that was a whole thing. And I felt like the school was really kind of scrambling to try to accept me, because it wasn't as extreme as maybe it is now. I don't necessarily feel like I was pushed, but I was definitely supported. And I was also a part of a GSA club. It was called As Is, and it was like like a gay straight alliance club. As you know, but really it was kind of just like an LGBTQ gender club, because there were a lot of like students there who identified as like non-binary and trans, and you would sit down and you would all like share what your pronouns were. I remember like there was this one girl who, I don't know, she wasn't like gay or anything. She just like wanted to go with her friend. She was like, "What do you mean? What are my pronouns?" Like she didn't understand what they were asking. So, I think 2015 was a different time. There weren't as many resources. There weren't as many vocal detransitioners. The issue wasn't as contentious as it is now because not as many people disagreed with it as staunchly. Because like I said, there weren't that many detransitioners. We weren't really hearing the horror stories of it. But yeah, no, I was definitely supported. Wouldn't necessarily say that like any particular staff members were trying to like push me into it, but I knew that in a way school was kind of like a safe space for me because I knew that there weren't going to be any staff members who were going to say like, actually, no, like you're a girl. I don't know if that had to do with the fact that I was at like a large secular public school, and I don't know, but that was my experience.
So I didn't socially. Oh, does it work? All right, cool. Maybe I'm just becoming deaf. Who knows? Okay. So, well, when a lot of people scream at you all the time, sometimes it can happen. So I didn't socially transition in high school, although I wanted to, but because I grew up in a progressive city, I sort of saw how this whole thing was starting to unfold. It really hit the 2016-2017 school year. And one of our girls' bathrooms became gender neutral, and then they had to toy with shutting it down because kids would use it to consume drugs, which is incredibly predictable. And anybody who deals with children should have been able to predict the fact that you put a bunch of teenagers into a space like that. They're like anything that you teach them about contraception and sex ed, that goes out the window. Anything you teach them about drugs in health class also goes out the window because now they have a little kumbaya space in the school to do it all. But I guess the reason why I'm telling you this story is unrelated to my social transition because it didn't happen in high school, but it's more related to your kids and their safety. It's also kind of answering the previous question, which I will like unabashedly do right now, which is basically how do you protect your kid? I think that starting from the youngest of ages, like if you have a little toddler, I mean, that's the age that you really need to start like inoculating them with the information that they'll need to not be seduced into these really bad ideas. I think a lot of parents are scared that if they even, bring up, the fact that like there are some boys who like to wear dresses, that their son will want to wear a dress. But really, it's actually like probably the most conservative thing that you could do these days is to tell your sons that they can play with baby dolls and experiment with like playing with different colors, and you can tell telling your daughters that if they want to wear a shirt with a truck on it, they can go for it, because actually what you're doing is if you teach your kids that it's okay for them to be gender nonconforming, what you're doing is basically inoculating them against this idea that because somebody, regardless of what their anatomy or their biological sex is, that if this person likes to do stereotypically masculine or feminine things, it literally makes them a member of the opposite sex. Like, this is the ideology that they're trying to teach your kids. And I think that a lot of parents worry that their kids might become nonconforming, or that their child's nonconformity is a sign of something like really catastrophic to happen. But the truth is that kids play around. Kids play adults. I mean, every parent knows this. It's not a crisis when a kid, wants to play dress up or, they're imitating the adults in their lives and they're trying to find their footing. It's really important that that behavior is not pathologized by you or by the school, because, the school is going to do it. Like, they are under the false belief that a child who is nonconforming is not just a child who is nonconforming, right? They're under the belief that a child who is nonconforming, that their body in its natural healthy state is existing in a state of pathology, and that you need to, flood that body with all kinds of unnatural interventions that are dangerous in order to align it with this mysterious, like, unproven and unprovable gendered soul. So the best way I think that you can, like, inoculate your kids against this, especially when they're young, is that, so I've been working on a series of books with an Israeli social worker who's the only professional in all of Israel to speak out against this madness, like, with her name and faith attached to it. We've been working on a series of books for boys and girls called What Makes a Dog, and A Dog Stays a Dog. So there's a sequel. There's a boys version and a girls version, and now there's even a coloring book version. And it basically just, I guess you can figure out what the book is about. It's basically an antidote to I Am Jazz, which they are peddling to your kids in school. And it is just about the most, like, backwards and regressive thing that you could possibly think of. So I recommend that you buy our books instead, because our books, the donations of them, it's a donation system. They go to basically helping Israeli detransitioners and just detrans activism in general. And I think that, the best, I guess, the way that you can really, like it's been said before, you can't rely on the teachers. You really can't rely on any institutions. Like I've said before, you're fighting a war, and every war that's ever been won has really invested a lot into propaganda. Right now, the TRAs are unfortunately winning because they've had a massive head start. Before everybody started getting involved, they had years and years of head start. But right now, we're all here together and we're planning a different war strategy. So you do have a lot of power in this situation. I would not feel hopeless that your kid is going to end up in, just because you can't homeschool your kids or whatever, that something bad is going to happen to them. No, like, you do actually, as a parent, you are the fundamentally, like, most important influence in your child's life. And if you can basically guide them towards, not being stuck in black and white thinking, which kids are, like, naturally prone to, and if you can, like, expand their horizons and allow them to think more critically and more broadly, which is fully within your power as a parent, like, I think your kid is going to be set, like to be pretty successful, against all the odds that are stacked against them by this institutional capture.
I want to thank, we could go on all night. Still on? Yes. I want to thank all of you for being here, and I want to thank all of the panelists. Thank you so much for staying. If you come to the Santa Fe event, we're also going to go 30 to 45 minutes over, so plan for that. I appreciate it. Thank you so much on behalf of Partners for Ethical Care.
Right.